Hi. It's only possible to make shows like Radio Free Midworld because people give so generously to our Patreon. Consider going to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv and kicking us a couple of bucks a month. It makes a huge difference for us and helps us do new shows, continue doing old shows, etc. Once again, patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. Welcome to Radio Free Midworld, a podcast about the Dark Tower series of books by Stephen King. My name is Cole Ross, and today I'm joined by Chase Greenlee.
Hello.
And by Jeremy Greer.
Hello, hello.
And we are here to talk about the continuation of the portion of Wizard and Glass called Susan. This is part 2 of Susan, picking up after the chapter called Shimi. I'm not going to say every proper noun that way, but it seemed good to hit it and emphasize it. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Cool. Yeah. So Jeremy,
I'm doing very well.
Jeremy, you were here last week, so I already know all this, but I'm going to get the kind of biographical information from Chase here. Man, I'm wasting no time today. Sorry about that. Sorry
right into it.
Rush. Yeah, but let's do this. Chase, what's your kind of first experience with what was your first experience with Wizard and Glass?
We're experiencing it presently.
Okay.
Yeah. This is I'm working my way through the book at the same pace of the show. I was actually had a pretty good lead on it, and then Witcher 3 happened, and I fell behind real bad.
Yeah.
This is going to be the podcast about talking about things that we are doing instead of the things that we should have been doing. Is that
exactly
right? We're gonna end this episode probably around like 9:30, and then from 9:30 until midnight, I'm going to play The Witcher 3.
Excellent.
Not because The Witcher 3 just came out, but because of pod homework. Sorry about that. I forgot that you're one of the guests who is reading along for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's aside from the at this point standard uncomfortable sexual stuff in this in Stephen King works, this is a real good book in general. I'm really enjoying all of this except for that uncomfortable sex stuff.
So what do you consider to be the uncomfortable stuff? Like the stuff with Rhea?
The stuff with Rhea, and also the fact that it's this is bordering on being explicitly explained when they are children.
Yeah. It's
the optics aren't great.
No. The short summary of it is not great. However, it is a very well told love story.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking of Rhea, at least it's consensual this time. So they're mostly consensual this time. So there's that, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's one very specific scene that's going to skeeve everybody out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The age thing is such a difficult thing to wrap my mind around, because I know what I was doing when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, and it's just strange to see this written in a book when I'm now almost 37 and in 2017. It just feels so much different to me now than it did when I first read this book. It's an odd experience.
Yeah, I have conflicted feelings about it, but I think in my head I just age them up to 17 and say, well, there we go.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's on the border of acceptable, maybe. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm happy you're enjoying this, because I am also very much enjoying it on my kind of second go through here. Not second. This is my third or fourth time through the book. Shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It is quite enjoyable, and I would like to dive into this because some cool stuff happens. The conspiracy starts being unraveled. Yeah. So let's jump right into it with kind of a summary. Last time, our ka-tet, not the one we started with, but the one Roland started with. Roland, Elaine, and Cuthbert ride to the town of Hambry and the barony of Magus in order to count things. They're put on this make work assignment to get away from Gilead because the heat is on there. While they're in the town, Roland meets a young girl named Susan, and they immediately fall in love in a way that could only be Ka. But in the meantime, they run afoul of these three kind of rogue mercenary lawmen, the big coffin hunters, who, along with the rest of the town, are up to more than they seem. So yeah, this section opens up with a chapter called On the Drop. We have just moved from a description of the showdown between the big coffin hunters and Roland's ka-tet, over to a scene of Susan riding furiously across the drop. And this has been 3 weeks since this dance where Roland said a pretty mean thing to her. And Susan is upset and distraught because of this just terrible confrontation that she had with her aunt over a shirt of all dumb things.
Sounds like something a 16, 17-year-old girl would get into a fight with her aunt about.
Yeah,
right. Why are you wearing all that goth clothing, Susan? Wear a white shirt.
I know you're not going outside with all that makeup on. Yeah.
It's not about the clothes, it's what the clothes represent.
But I don't know, this feels pretty authentic to me because, you know, the fights that people have in general, and especially the fights that, you know, younger people have with older family members, it's never about the actual thing that it seems that they're about, right?
Mm.
Yeah. You know, it's exactly what you said, Jace. You know, it is what the clothes represent, because these are, you know, the mayor who has a claim on Susan's virginity is saying, hey, dress up all frilly for me. And Cordelia, who really wants this deal to go through, is like, nah, I should probably wear that to make him feel good so I can get my money.
Mm-hmm.
Cordelia's just the worst.
Cordelia's idea is that if somebody sees you wearing it, they might tell the mayor, and that might make him happy. And I'm like, he's already paid for the goods. Like, at this point, what is he going to do?
He can't really back out of it.
Cole, before we get too far, I forgot to talk about something in the last episode regarding Roland and when he says that terrible thing about Susan, or terrible thing to Susan.
It's where they're dancing, and he she asks him to be discreet, and he says, yes, I can be discreet. As for propriety, I'm surprised you know the meaning of the word. So essentially calling her, you know, any number of terrible things about her sexuality and her terrible situation. Continue, Jeremy.
But right before that, as it dawns on him what she's doing as they're sitting at the dinner table, he has to resist the urge of like reaching down for his gun so that he can shoot her. Mm-hmm. And it's just that wild swing of teenage emotion that I think really sells this love story more than a lot of the weird stuff that we get into later. But the way that Roland just swings wildly from "I'm about to kill you, girl" to I want to love you forever it's such a teenage thing. Yeah. And I love it so much. And it's these huge sprawling expanses that, like, you know, he's riding around the drop and like riding down the drop and crying, and it's just very teenage wasteland almost. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just very way over the top and emotional.
Yeah.
The number one thought that kept going through my head whenever these scenes would crop up is just like, these children, these kids.
Why can't you just make up your goddamn mind? Like, specifically with Roland, it's, you know, we mostly know him as an adult, but even as a kid, you know, from the Gunslinger chapters in his past, and then now this, we get the sense that he is already this budding kind of consummate professional. You know, he is the natural leader of this group. You know, he has the plan together. They probably trust him too much, given what's, you know, going to happen and what's going on. But, like, contrast his, you know, cold-bloodedness. You know, at one point, Shimi like gets a look at Roland's eyes and says, "Oh, he is more of a killer than any of the big coffin hunters." Contrast that with these wild swings of emotion and his kind of capacity for this, you know, instant romantic love. You're right. It is just this wild disparity. They're all over the road with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you for catching that detail, because I dropped it. Yeah. But this begins, or continues, a little bit of, you know, kind of cloak and dagger that Roland is, you know, setting about to, in order to make his apology, but also also get Susan in on his little side of the conspiracy, his little side of the secret. And he does this by having Shimi bring some flowers to Susan with a note.
Roland, what Reddit thread have you been reading to know that this is the right thing to do? My dude, what?
So he's probably on red pill, verging into men going their own way, possibly like off in the mist, but rapidly approaching his incel. Yeah. I mean, it's not just about like, oh, I want you back, baby. It's, he wants to arrange a meeting. It's a little bit more. He wants to figure out where she stands in this strange town with its kind of strange alliances. Let's give it up for Shimi here, because Shimi plays Shimi plays people's perception of him in order to get out of trouble. It's great.
Yeah, no, Shimi is surprisingly sharp at multiple points throughout the rest of this chapter.
Mm-hmm. So he is in a lot of ways kind of a standard Stephen King, developmentally delayed person, a standard character that he kind of goes to, but like Shimi is able to kind of use that perception that people have about him as being kind of slow in order to basically get away with lying or get away with this stuff when he has to, specifically for his friends, because Shimi loves all three of them. He calls Cuthbert his first best friend. He calls Elena his second best friend. He calls Roland his third, except he uses their names, which I cannot remember. Yeah. Very cool. So when they meet, Roland apologizes for his remark, and this begins again the indecisiveness, the back and forth. And I love this line, and I think it goes back a little bit to what I was saying before about him, again, going back and forth between being smitten and being a professional. It's a great quote here. Roland accepted love as a fact, not as a flower. And it really kind of throws Susan off guard for how literal-minded he is about this stuff. Like, he is not tripped up in the same kind of aspect of this that she is.
Or that she's seen other boys pretend to be, right? Like he's just like, yeah, this is a thing. This is the way I feel. Like this isn't like, it doesn't really, like, it obviously it involves you, but like I can't change this. Like, it's just a fact of life. Like, this is not something that I'm going to write poetry about, because I don't really understand why people do that. Like, I know that I love you, and I love you more than anything in this world has ever been loved, ever, and that's it. That's a straight fact. I love how brutal Roland is in his like kind of romantic qualities in a lot of cases. He just kind of is like, yeah, no, totally. I'm gonna do anything for you. Mm-hmm. Literally, I will literally do. Like, even later in this chapter, like, it kind of scares her. She's like, oh shit, he might be serious. I might need to be worried.
Yeah. Chase, did you have anything to say about that before I move on to the next one here? I don't want to.
No, you're fine. Honestly, in this part, this little exchange here, I got caught up on one little detail that King put in there of just the scene. Apparently, Roland rides with a lance just strapped to his horse.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's never been made mention of before on, like, in any reference to horses, not in any of the, preceding three books or in this book up to now. But apparently, like, folk just ride around with lances, like that's a thing. Like, and I get, like, these are knights. These are folks of, who would apparently know how to use that. Yeah. But they never really make the line of where the fantasy, like the European fantasy elements and the American Western elements are meeting. And apparently that's one of them.
Yeah. So the lance was mentioned earlier when they were riding into town.
Okay.
Rhea saw it through the glass.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It is a particular detail, and it does kind of paint a picture of him as being, the white knight in shining armor a little bit. I just always read it as he is really into amateur impromptu jousting.
I mean, what else could it
be? Right.
Who ain't?
All right. Thinking about it, I think when she saw the lance through in the vision, I assumed it was a metaphorical kind of thing. I didn't think, oh no, they got just fucking lances with them.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no, it was so it was Roland riding in with his lance, and then Cuthbert has Lookout.
Right.
Or kind of their it's their flair again, peacocking, right?
There's a moment
Lookout's
later
so good.
in a section where Roland is remembering, like, you know, that he's of the Eld or whatever, and traced back all the way back to Arthur, who rode into battle with Excalibur above his head and his gunslingers is by his side. And I was like, wait, what? This mental picture is very confusing to me. Were they gunslingers back then too?
Yeah, and wait, didn't they melt that down to make the? Oh, now my head hurts. Oh no.
And actually, since we're talking about that that mental image, there was also, I think, at the start of the Sheeny chapter, there was a description of a tapestry with Arthur Eld coming out of a pyramid with Excalibur held aloft above his head.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Sure.
It is.
Arthur Eld might as well be the main character in an Assassin's Creed right now. Jesus.
That is very good. that is a good observation. Regardless, he has this lance, and he is deadly serious about wondering just how down she is with the affiliation. Remember, the affiliation is kind of the established order, you know, the knighthood, you know, the kingship that, you know, rules out of Gilead, and it stands in opposition to John Farson, the good man, this bandit turned revolutionary, who is definitely kind of some bad news, at least for the people of the affiliation. And Roland has, you know, good reason to ask her this, because, like, people in the town are not playing it straight for them. First off, they seem way too enthusiastic about the affiliation.
I like this a lot because it shows the difference between Susan, who is like, yeah, like, you know, whatever, like, they're around, and like, we'll give them some tithe horses every once in a while or whatever, but like, she's not particularly excited about it. Like, it kind of feels like being in what it was like when Barack Obama was president, and you just didn't really have to care because things were okay.
Yeah,
versus now, where
right?
you're like, it's resistance or die. So
Right.
Right.
and that's what, and everyone else in town is so overly excited and like, oh yeah, like, you know, jumping up to do salutes or whatever you do with the affiliation, that it triggers his suspicion. It's a really nice, like, you've gone too far the other direction kind of thing, and I really like it.
You protest too much.
Exactly.
Yeah. My favorite detail here, so, you know, they've got these steins that are, you know, made, these ceremonial glasses for toasting Arthur Eldon, and they keep offering it to the kids, but it's all whiskey. Like, yes, for the affiliation, let's toast it. Hey, here you go. Because remember, they're not supposed to have that. They're here because they were out helling. You want some whiskey, kids?
Yeah. I like the idea that they would just do this with 16-year-olds no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, do they offer Susan whiskey when she drops by?
That's got to be safer than the water. And you see what the horses
is.
look like. Come on, all these extra legs rolling around.
Apparently, they're better off than we initially thought they were.
Oh, true. The horses are threaded, and like, I guess Hambry has the best horses. The best horses themselves. Whenever I think of horses in this world, I always think of the ones that have their guts on the outside.
Yeah, the bad ones from Gunslinger.
Yeah. You know, the bad horses. The more serious thing, and the one that is, you know, less just like a, you know, let's say ephemeral, I suppose, is that the town officials, they're underreporting the number of horses by, like, a lot. You know, Roland, like, points out at the drop and says, hey, tell me, like, what do you think of the number of horses that you see out there based on what you know? And Susan finally sees it, you know, through his eyes, that, like, yeah, wait, there are way too many horses here. They're, like, lowballing the affiliation.
Which, like, even she's surprised that she hadn't noticed, right? Like, she's like, wait a minute, there are way too many horses out here. How have I not noticed this?
Yeah. It's like, you know, something isn't matching up. Somebody is lying about this for, you know, for one particular reason or another. And I think this is also where it's dropped in that one of the three, saw oxen, which are creatures so exotic that they've only ever been spotted in storybooks.
Yeah, I believe it was Elaine who was like, I couldn't believe it. I've never seen these things, and I can't believe we're out in some, middle of nowhere town. And there's freaking oxen out here. That's crazy.
And here are these unicorns. These big, fluffy unicorns. Yeah. And kind of to throw a little bit more onto this, Roland has suspicions about Pat Delgado, Susan's father, his death, right? Because it seems really weird that this otherwise good person who is the horse master of this town would die by being trampled by his own horse. Like, it doesn't seem to line up.
Well, especially because now there's a lot more horses out there. So, those two facts combined, like one could be ignored, but if you combine the two, it really points at some foul play to Cy Delgado's death.
Yeah. Somebody's teaching these horses how to fuck. Jesus. This one goes all the way to the top, guys.
Man, this has just been a weird day for me on Duckfeed podcast talking about fucking domesticated animals, because me and Gary had a whole cow fucking bit in Days of Future Cast. So
that's a bit of
I don't know exactly when this is going to coincide with each other, but I'm really excited for them to come out during the same week.
That might actually happen, Jeremy. So all of these are big, open-hanging questions. How did Pat really die? Why are there so many horses? And who taught them how to fuck? And that's kind of what they leave on. Oh, also because they are gluttons for trouble, they kiss ferociously. They try to devour each other's faces.
Yeah, they kiss so hard that they draw blood from one another, which is like some serious teenage bad kissing, but can't help yourself at bad kissing.
Yeah, you shouldn't need stitches after a smooch.
You shouldn't, no. But sometimes you gotta, know. Yeah. I mean, this is not straight up vor yet. Like, that's probably gonna be like chapter 24, but we're good there.
Yep.
Kissing shouldn't have a winner.
Oh man. So back at their shitty little barn that they stay in, the Bar K, they get their first note from home. I forget if we mentioned it last week, but they've got these homing pigeons that I feel real bad for, because something bad's going to happen to these pigeons. Yeah. There's a detail here. Farson is moving to the east, but it's not know when, where, or why. Just keep your ear to the ground. And Cuthbert's doing that, but not so much for Farson. He notices a gold hair on Roland's shirt. Which, yeah. Cuthbert's things are gonna rise to a head, like in the next episode, with this, but it's starting to show up here.
I like this moment that the three of them have together, because Roland is basically said, like, yeah, we're just gonna continue what we're doing. We're just going to keep counting, we're going to be counting fish or whatever that they're doing. We're not going to worry about the horses. And he kind of turns around to look in the sunset, and Cuthbert, like, just very quickly pulls his hair from him and then, like, shows it to Elaine. And they're both, like, sharing looks with each other. And it's just like, yep, this is exactly how friends work. They're like, I know I know what's happening. Roland's got a girl.
Roland's doing a dumb.
Is this going to be problems? Yeah, it's going to be problems. It's going to be real big problems. So yeah, they have to avoid going after these horses because they have... I mean, I want to see one of these castles boards that they're talking about, because like it gets more elaborate every time I pay attention to the way that it's described. So this entire thing is kind of described as a game of castles, which seems like a game of chess, except they talk about like coming out around a hillock. I'm like, okay, does this have like topology to it? Is it like a Warhammer board?
I was gonna say, are they breaking out the D&D terrain sets? Like, I'm down.
I kind of looked at this as like what is Battleship, like with like a divider in the middle or something that would eventually maybe you'll be able to like flatten it at some point or something, but I really have no idea. Like I'm very curious where Stephen King comes up with these weird board games that he likes to talk about.
Yes, Watch Me and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess Watch Me is just poker, though.
Well, they call out poker and Watch Me as different things back in, I think, in Shimi.
Oh. Yeah, I suppose you're right.
Because I was thinking the same thing. It's like, oh, this is just fantasy poker. Nope, apparently not.
Oh, to the concordance. It might actually be in there. I should probably go look that up and report back next time.
Excellent.
Yeah, but they, in order to avoid exposing their position, to show what their real intention is, and, to avoid saying like, hey, we know what's up, they can't go and count the horses. They cannot leave the fishing side of Hambry, because, well, they want to act in secrecy as much as possible. Although that's going to be pretty hard, because this next chapter, Beneath the Peddler's Moon, where we get some time with our good friend, old redheaded Roy DePape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a real bastard.
The guy that hecked up so bad they sent him out of town.
Oh, he hecked up his boots so bad he had to go, leave, get out of here, man. Take your glasses. We already knew Roy was a jerk, because he was about ready to kill Shimi for messing up his shoes. But this little scene here shows that he is indeed completely immoral. So he's been set out to kind of follow the back trail of the kids to figure out if anybody has seen them, knows where they're coming from, knows who they really are. And he gets to the town of Ritzy, which is described as a one-stop shop where you go, you buy your beer, and then the Undertaker's right next door so you can be buried after you die from a bar fight. Like, it's a real piece of shit town. Between Gilead
unless you're a minor, in which case you can't buy your beer at the normal store. You have to buy it at the company store.
True. Yeah.
I just really like that little detail that they put in.
that company script exists even in Midworld. Yeah. So there's a protracted scene with Roy and this old man who has seen the kids, who, actually Roy even recognizes from before, knows that the guy, is telling the truth because, he also recognizes Roy. And he says, oh, I'll give you some metal for your, for your answer. And we get this long explanation from the guy saying, yeah, I could tell one of them was descended from, Arthur Eld himself, son of Stephen Deshane, was going by the name Willie Borchard, or okay, I gotcha. And then the metal that Roy decides to give him is lead, because A, Roy is a jerk, B, Roy thought he was doing him a favor because he was already starting to eat the devil grass, and C, Roy's a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any thoughts about this particular scene? Because at this point it is no longer just a suspicion. They know that they're gunslingers.
There was one bit of description actually in here. I'm trying to find it off the real quick, but I can't. There was a bit of description where they described the entire town as smelling like the outhouses from the mines. Just the wind. The entire city is just downwind of that. And that's a very, very evocative in all the wrong senses description for it. It's yeah, that is a place you don't want to be for any extended period of time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've been to towns like that, right? Where just whatever is nearby you can smell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I was a little kid, we went to Wapakoneta, Ohio, which is the birthplace of Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon. We went there to see the museum and all of that, and all of that stuff was cool. The problem was Wapakoneta, at least at the time, was a big pig farm in town. And if you've ever been near a pig shit lagoon, you know that you can't not smell anything. It doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing. You're going to have that right in your face the whole time. It ruined that vacation.
Oh, I know that all too well, actually. I live in Bowling Green, Ohio, and there is one apartment complex over on the south side of town that is unfortunately close to a pig slaughterhouse. And on the wrong day, wrong time of day, in the middle of summer, that is a smell that is inescapable if you're in that part of if you're over that way.
Yeah, that's awful.
it's real bad.
Yeah.
Chicken farms were my downfall growing up as a kid. Like they were all over North Louisiana, and then the town that I went to high school in had a paper plant, and
so it smelled like farts.
Beautiful sunrises and sunsets. Like, I mean, pollution gives you some great views, but
magnifies the sun.
Boy, that place stinks.
Yeah, ritzy as anything but, as Roy observes and Stephen King writes. So yeah, the plot thickens and the pieces move even closer here. A little bit later, time moves by these big kind of leaps here. Weeks and weeks at a time. Roland, Elaine, and Cuthbert go out and see the Thinny, and I want to hear what you guys think of this kind of first encounter with the real horror of the Thinny, not just distant and not just something distant and kind of universe threatening, but something that is getting in their heads.
The worst thing about the Thinny is that it's apparently alive.
Yeah.
That it's not just a natural occurrence. It's not from nature. It's some malevolent presence. And we know that, people are already starting to use the term before the world has moved on. But we know as the reader that everything in this world is going to shit. Time is coming loose from its moors. And so this is probably a symptom of that. And it's terrifying. Like the fact that it's kind of cozied up at the end of this canyon, the fact that you see it reach out with a tendril and snack a bird. I said snack, I meant snag, but snag and snack I guess would work.
Snack. Both works.
And then when it actively starts talking to the boys, telling Roland, you don't have to worry about girls here. You don't have to worry about traitorous mothers here. You can just step in. That's some weird and disquieting shit right there.
So I just want to pull this up because I love the way that it's that it's phrased. Jump in and let all of these cares cease. There is no love of girls to worry you here, and no mourning of lost mothers to weigh your child's heart. Only the hum of the growing cavity at the center of the universe. Only the punky sweetness of rotting flesh. Come, gunslinger, be a part of the Thinny. And it's not talking to him in this, guttural, deep rhyme chaos voice. It's speaking to him in his dad's voice and his mom's voice and his own. Basically saying hey, give up all hope and just walk into this oblivion that is on the other side of this thing that I am.
The thing that really snagged me about this as kind of the first time reader is that maybe I know a little bit more about it just from listening to the show, and we've jumped around a little bit, especially covering the mist. We know that the Thinny is literally where essentially the floors of the tower are starting to thin and wear together. And this is giving that force a sentience. And I'm reading through, I don't know if that force is the actual thinning of the tower or if it's the tower itself. We have been going through and, he talks about going to the tower. We got to get to the tower. And I'm still I still don't know why we're trying to get to this fucking tower. But we're on the way to it. And now I'm wondering, does Tower think? What can Tower?
Or is this what waits beyond the Tower's influence?
Right. Yeah. Is this what we're trying to stop? This adds a new layer of intrigue that I hadn't really considered before. Obviously before I read this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that cosmic horror aside, and also the kind of kick and rad aspect of this huge tendril of water reaching up and grabbing a bird just to eat it and making the whole thing glow yum, bird snack. They're here in order to get a sense for what this is, and I love the line okay, well, what are we doing here? And Roland says, we're here to count. So there we go, one Thinny. Way too many horses, but one Thinny. Just a little bit of good witticism there from a character who is not normally noted for that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the conclusion that they come to with some of this stuff right here, or at least their hypothesis, is that the town itself is working to do something for Farson. and that there has to be something more than horses, because though these horses are very good horses, good, have some oats.
Good fucking horses. Am I right, Cole?
Yep. Yeah. He could get those anywhere. There has to be something more. And we're going to find out what that is here in the chapter called Sitgo. You remember when Roland's riding in, he finds this kind of ghostly oil field where some of the derricks are still working, where some of the pumps are still going. That's going to come later, though. We have Susan, who has a new horse. It's Felicia. And though Cordelia says it's a gift, it's actually a part of the contract, and the horse belonged to them anyway. And, Susan can't quite get that through her aunt's thick skull. Yeah. And when she goes to get new shoes for this horse, she notices, hey, the blacksmith kind of seems flush with cash. Like, he's kind of willing to extend me some credit. Like, things are a little bit more prosperous here. And she thinks, oh, well, he's probably just being nice to me because of my relationship with the mayor. But we're going to find out that's not quite what it is. When she goes to meet Roland, there's a little bit of back and forth with this. Like, Shimi brings another note saying, like, hey, go meet me at Sitgo. She's like, oh, I'm not going to do this. She sends another note to Roland about it. Like, I could do without the hesitation. Honestly, it makes it a little bit hard to draw a straight line from one thing to another.
There is like just 5 pages of this back and forth. It's like, will I go? I don't want to go. I want to go. I'm going to, cloak and dagger, and needful cloak and dagger, but
right. Yeah, she
shaved a little off.
Yeah, she does everything except like pick up a flower and play Pluckety-Doo, which is their name for like, oh, do I, does he love me? Does he not? Does he love me? Does he not? Yeah. The game of Pluckety-Doo.
Wow, is that an Ohio thing? I've never heard that in my life.
No.
I wasn't gonna call you on it till you repeated it, and I was like, I can't.
No,
I
I
can't just let him get away with it.
I just wanted to make up a name for that thing. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what you call that. Like, is that okay? Wait a minute. Am I entirely crazy? Like, that's a thing.
No, that's a thing.
No.
Okay.
That is a thing. I always called it "Love Me Not," right? Like, that's always the thing. Like, does he love me? Does he love me not? Yeah.
Okay.
But Pluckety-Doo is also a great, like, good like Southern twang twist on it. Oh, she's playing her game of Pluckety-Doo over there.
Yeah. No, I just made that up because everything in Midworld has to have a goofy name to it. Yeah. Eventually, she passes word along through Cuthbert, kind of getting a little bit of casual misogyny from Cuthbert, saying like, oh, she's clever. I didn't think she would be because pretty girls don't have to be. So, good on you, Cuthbert. You got we all have some growing to do, right?
If you can't grow, what's the point of getting up in the morning, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, try again. So, Cuthbert and Elaine, they set up a watch as Roland and Susan go venturing into Sitgo. Like, Susan, even though she grew up near this thing, she would never go in alone because she's terrified of it. And Roland, wants somebody who's familiar with the place to take him in. And there's this kind of distinct feeling that they're being watched. In fact, at one point, Susan says basically, hey, fuck off, you old witch, because they are being watched. We haven't checked in with Rhea in a bit after she got all gropey back there, but she's in a bad way. Rhea and her orb, they've been getting acquainted.
As one does get with an orb.
Right. You just gotta look into that thing, see what it shows you.
Gotta get all up in it.
Yeah.
Gotta get up in them orbs. I like the fact that now that like King goes out of his way to specifically say like no one would ever mistake her as a young girl now, because even though she had an enormous amount of vitality and this let her live a long time, like this orb is sucking it out of her vampire style, like slowly but surely.
Yeah.
And that's like making this orb like a thing, like a thing with not necessarily like conscience, but with a thing with its own agency is very spooky and scary to me.
Yeah. Yeah. This thing that kind of like calls out and becomes like a literal addiction for her. It makes it something more than just the standard like, oh, Scryer's orb or something like that, your crystal ball or what have you. this is no good. And so, as we saw at the beginning of the book, when Jonas brought it to her and she decided to crack that bad boy open and void the warranty, it'll show you, it shows the viewer things, kind of this far sight. But it only shows people in kind of like compromising situations. So there's a little bit of a rundown later on, but it's worth talking about here because I love this orb so much. But it's like people fighting, people who are having sex, just people at their very worst is what it sees. And this plays right into Rhea as this totally cynical, just misanthrope of a person, plays right into it. And it draws the vitality out of her as she looks into it. And so she becomes this kind of persistent observer because she takes an interest, because she sees the budding romance between Susan and Will, quote unquote Will. So we're going to come back to this. Roland, in kind of explaining why they're here, says like, yeah, we have some suspicions, and you should also know that my actual name isn't Will. My name is Roland, and I have now trusted you with my life. And they venture in, and Roland kind of demonstrates his skills. He identifies who was walking here based on the tracks. I think he says, "Oh, that's Roy DePape," because he's got he walks with his right foot turned in a little bit. Seems like, what are you?
A question he's going to be hearing from women for a long, long time.
Well, and I love his explanation because it's just trailcraft. Like it's real easy. You just learn it. It's just that. No, no.
You just have it beaten into you by a man named Court. So it's not all laid bare yet. I can't even remember. This is where he says, this is my name. He definitely tells her his name before they kind of consummate their relationship.
I think it's right after. It's coming up here. It's like right after they find the oil.
Yeah. And that's important because the big coffin hunters have actually gathered what Farson wants. It's not horses. It's like you said, Chase. It's big old tankers full of oil with some fresh wheels, which confirms to Susan that, yes, the blacksmith and probably the whole town is in on this. And also, it's been hidden by pine boughs. So you don't hide something that is okay. What do you guys think of this revelation?
I sort of expected this on first reading the book, like, the thing in the first part of this book to not be a major thing later on. And the fact that there's an oil, like not refinery, but like an oil, there's all these oil wells like right outside of this sleepy town that Roland has to be in. Like, obviously some shit is going to go down. Like,
Chekhov's crude.
Chekhov's crude. Yeah.
Chekhov's crude. The surprising thing to me is that like how bad of a job they did really hiding this. And I think even Roland says they're like, yeah, they obviously kind of disrespect us a little bit because this is not a great job. Like, they barely hid their tracks. Like, they obviously they pulled all these branches off the tree, but you can still see that the branches are missing, meaning that you should go look where there's a bunch of branches and see what's happening with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this wasn't necessarily much of a revelation for me at this point, I guess is my point.
Yeah. Chase?
Pretty much the same thing. I didn't know why they would need the oil for, just because we haven't really gotten a whole lot about Farson as of yet. I mean, we know he is the good man, and we know he is trying to lead this uprising, but we haven't heard anything about military prowess or having these old world military machines that might be able to. I think Roland says they could lay out 10,000 in a single battle. So we had this is the first time hearing a lot of this. So it wasn't so much a mystery to be solved as something to just kind of uncover as we were going through.
Yeah. The enormity of this, I remember on my first read through, kind of hit home because, okay, there's oil here. what else from our world or what else from a more technological society would be here. It turns out that it's not just like cars or, you know, cannons or whatever. Like, they're talking about sending tanks and machine guns in after people who are on horseback with revolvers. Like, this is setting up for like a Last Samurai kind of thing on a very large scale. And this is kind of a weird resonance with The Stand as well. Because, you know, not to summarize that entire book, but the idea was, you know, that like, oh, the things that led to the super flu or the nuclear weapons or anything that factored into that book, you know, it was the death trip, right? It was all the technology and order that led to basically more efficient ways to kill everybody. There's an echo of that here. You know, Susan says like, oh, even Farson has to know the ways of the old people are the ways of death. You know, everyone knows that. And Roland just basically fires back, yeah, death is what John Farson's all about. So, you know, you have the broken tools just laying around waiting for everybody to come pick them back up. Yeah, so another piece kind of slots into place, and they have to pretend that they don't know it.
Yeah, I think that's the most aggravating part of, and it's not necessarily in the section that we're covering today with the waiting. Like, it's definitely going to come to a head in the next episode of the podcast. But like this thing with them having to pretend to not know things has to just be infuriating. Like, it's just got to be the most aggravating thing in the world for them.
Especially the oxen, because this is where the oxen actually came into play, because they were that's what they saw hauling the tankers. Like, Roland was able to, you know, with his insane tracking abilities, he's like, oh yeah, no, these oxen were here. It was a while ago, because this is the dirt is as solid as concrete, but I could still see where their oxen pulled. I don't know if the oxen come back into play later on for something a little bit bigger, but this is the first time that piece of the puzzle has started to slot into place.
Yeah, they were using them as draft animals to pull the tankers because the horses couldn't quite cut it. Yeah. So that lands with a reverberating kind of bang across the horizon. Sorry I used the word bang. I didn't mean to do that because things are about to get a little weird. But we have more indecision, you know, as they part, you know, as the news kind of sinks in. Susan kind of gives him an ultimatum saying like, hey, you know, I know that we've only just met, but like, you need to know this. If you love me, then love me, is the way that she phrases it, saying like, hey, this is the decision point. And Roland, being tied up in the way that he is, you know, turns her down, you know, A, because of her promise, but also B, knowing that, you know, he will not take her if she ends up going through this. She does not want to share her with anybody. And so this is another, I would call it heartbreaking, but it changes literally the next chapter. So
I think it's interesting though, because they're both honorable people and they're both hung up on their honor. And this is Susan saying like, if I'll break my promise for you if you come to me to do it. And this is Roland saying like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm too honorable. There's too much going on or whatever. And when Susan rides off from this, she's real mad because, as you might imagine, this is basically just pushing this all back on her and saying like, no, you dishonor yourself and, you know, crawl on your knees to me.
Yeah.
And but I'm not going to meet you halfway in this. I'm not going to dirty myself doing this. And that's kind of a shitty thing for Roland to do. But like you said, literally in the next chapter, this gets reversed and it's, you know, they're back into the teenage love fest again. So
yeah, you know, and everything is moving so quickly because they are so young. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that I have anything more to say about this. It's just interesting to see it laid out like this, where everybody's, you know, kind of prejudices and complications fall together in such a way that nothing actually hits the ground. Like, there's no actual change. They're just propping each other up at this stalemate. You know, and Susan even has, like, you know, the voice of her father came to her and said, you mind your business and Kyle will mind its. Like, essentially getting I was about to say oh gosh, advice from beyond the grave to just go for it, but no, it was just her imagination. It was her head. Yeah, and Roland hasn't quite come around to it. Yeah. Complicated. Busy. Moving on here to Bird and Bear and Hare and Fish. The name of this chapter, where things get real. I mean, one of the times it gets real in this book. Things get real a lot. Susan is kind of forced into her big decision moment by this really gross encounter with the mayor.
Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah. This is not a good situation,
especially with the Larry David imagery that you popped in last episode.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I listened to it. I finished up reading, and then I noticed that had popped up in the feed. It's like, oh, okay, I'll listen to this, and that is that's a real bad one to pop in there after the fact.
Oh. Somebody went there in After Effects and just started a motion track on that. Yep, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, head replacing. Jeremy,
there's enough.
Oh, good. Sorry.
There's enough entourage to swap in and out. That's fine. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy, it sounded like you were going to say something.
No, not at all. I just this is super gross, and I wish Chase hadn't reminded me about the Larry David image, because that's now what I have in my head. I had forgotten about it. So,
see, here's the thing.
It's to me.
I said
I know.
I said I was sorry.
It was an It Follows situation. Okay, I gave it to you. I didn't have it anymore.
Oh no, and we've spread it. We spread it to a couple thousand people. No. We should describe what happens. Like, Susan basically gets catfished into a really vulnerable situation. Like, she's called to the mayor's manor for some weird little chore about her dresses. Like, she is the Reap Girl, essentially the queen of the Halloween parade. She has all these costume changes, and like, oh, you need to come for another fitting because one of the dresses was destroyed in an incident that involved dog farts. That was I forgot about the dog farts as a little detail.
I did too.
In this.
Yeah.
What a weird, like, this little I don't know what you would call her. She's not like a serving girl, but this assistant that works at the mayor's house or whatever has a weird personality. Call Susan Mom or Mom.
Maid.
What's that, Chase?
I think it's her maid. They call her out specifically as being Susan's maid.
Yeah, it's like her attendant or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so she's kind of like waiting there for as the maid goes away. She starts having this like fantasy. She goes into her head like, oh, doing handsy stuff with Roland, and then she realizes that behind her, and this should probably get a warning. I'm sorry about doing all the warnings, but it seems prudent anyway. Gross non-consensual thing happening here. It turns out that it actually is happening. The mayor is behind her, feeling her up from behind, and also he is latched on and he dry humps her until he climaxes. Yeah. So Susan rightfully feels very violated by this.
And filthy is the word that she uses. And man, like, this is bad enough as it is, but like Stephen King, like, writing dialogue for this dude of like, get out, ye poison, is just like, it's just so not great. It's just so bad. And if you put yourself in this situation where there's this old, like, pervy 60-year-old dude who's probably used to getting what he wants, and this like 16-year-old girl who has never done anything in her entire life except draw a little blood with Roland. Mm-hmm. Like, it's got to be just the most awful first sexual experience of her life, right? Like, maybe not, or one of. I know, like, the other sexual experience with Rhea, which is probably even worse. So, like, this chick has not had a good introduction to human physiology 101 is all I'm saying. It's not been a good couple of months for this chick.
Right. Yeah, it's real rough. And she realizes, like, on the back of this that, okay, he's found a way around the contract. Like, he's figured out a way to use me for his own needs without actually, breaking what Rhea has laid down. And so he's just gonna keep doing this no matter what. If she's ever alone at the manor, then there's gonna be a real problem. So that's what drives her to her ultimate decision here. That and Aunt Cord, who really minimizes this, saying like, hey, what's done is done, doesn't matter, blah blah blah, completely disregarding her and almost kind of like not believing her.
And I like that Cordelia scares Susan a little bit. I mean, I don't like it. It's interesting writing, I guess I should say. But she expects Cordelia to explode with rage when Susan kind of snaps at her a little bit after Cordelia is minimizing her, and she doesn't. Cordelia just kind of looks at her with this blank expression, similar to the blank expression that was in Mayor Thorin's eyes after he finished.
Yeah.
And just says like, what's done is done. And that's all there is to it. And that almost breaks her heart, like even more than all of the yelling and screaming that they've gone through with one another has.
Yeah. And so she decides to give way to Ka. Like she, rides away. She does, she doesn't even take time to put the saddle onto her horse. Rides and happens to pass by, Roland, who was in his thinking spot. He comes up on her and like, hey, like something seems wrong.
How you doing?
Hey, you seem real vulnerable right now.
Yeah, I guess that would be how ye doing, right?
How ye
in the parlance of the time.
Yeah, in the parlance. And he's made up his mind too. He walks up and says, "Hey, make your offer again." He doesn't have to say what it is, but like, yes, if you offer again, I'll say yes. And he says, "So if you love me, then love me." And they do it. They have sex. And so they were joined, and so they were doomed, is the way the book puts it. Yeah. And
this is at least written in a very sweet fashion, right? Like there's lots of loving touches, and there's lots of like face-to-face contact, and it's all nice and consensual. Like this finally feels like a okay sexual experience. I can even like overlook the fact that these are like 15 and 16-year-olds because like, hey, they're teenagers. Like they're basically adults. So
right. Or in this time, blah blah blah. It's et cetera, and down the line. It's not transactional. They have waited. They have tested their resolve against this. It's not one person taking advantage of the other, or not one person being at the whim of this system or this deal or these customs. It is the two of them approaching it equally, wanting it equally. Rhea sees this. I guess it's not all good.
Yeah. And
she is completely uninterested in them having sex aspect of this. Because she's seen this any number of times. And it even
including just with like almost dead people is what she implies, or not quite living people. Yeah. I'm like, what? Yeah. What the fuck are you into, Rhea?
Yeah, like, I'm not interested in watching these teenagers having sex like they were the first ones to discover it. I've seen them sometimes in 3s and 4s, most of them not alive. And it's like, well, Rhea, come on, stop being edgy, Rhea. Oh man, that's no good. So
faces of death going up on her crystal ball.
Yep. So she's not so much interested in that part, but she's interested in the aftermath. If you remember toward the beginning of last episode, before Susan left Rhea's hut, Rhea put her under a spell and said like, hey, on the night when you lose your virginity, etc. was ASMR. Like, okay. And now we're going to see what this is, because, they go to sleep, to sleep it off. And Roland notices that she's gone away, that Susan's gone away, and tracks her down to a river. She's gone there and gotten a sharp rock, and it looks like she's about to cut her throat. But instead she starts like cutting her hair off. Rhea has, for the crime that Susan committed of, I think, disrespecting her cat, and said like, oh, on the night of your consummation, guess what? You're going to cut off your hair and everybody will know. And this is all the sweeter because it's going to expose what has happened, that she has broken her promise to the mayor as well. And Roland arm wrestles.
What a devious bitch Rhea is.
Yeah.
She's so fucking devious.
Yep. I love the way Roland puts this together too, because he's like, okay, it would have to be her, because like that is such a kind of violence that only another woman would understand toward another. Like, oh, a guy would not ever think of like of programming that in. You know, they wouldn't give any mind to how devastating that would actually be. Yeah, Rhea's just terrible as like the arch villain of this particular story. Yeah,
the recent Inhumans series on that Marvel is doing, like in the very first episode, the chick with the hair, Medusa, gets all of her hair cut off, kind of against her will. So yeah, dudes have apparently figured that out since then.
Yeah, since the long ago, since this one.
Mm-hmm.
Rhea's about to see it, but Musty breaks her concentration, and she figures, I guess I'm just gonna. I'll see the aftermath later. It's fine. Roland stops her, like he arm wrestles her to get the rock away and break the trance. He tries to hypnotize her to figure out exactly what happened, but hypnosis can't reveal hypnosis. Beyond a certain point, everything is just this wall of pink, and we know what that is, but they do not.
Right?
Yeah, but Roland doesn't really have any clue, and he can't. He's like, he's heard of, because she keeps calling it like a pink moon, and he's like, I've heard of blue moons, never pink moons though.
Yeah, I've never listened to that particular Nick Drake album. Sick Nick Drake references happening here.
That was what Pluckety Do on it, right? That was the big single off that album.
Yeah, Pluckety Do. I'm real sad nobody likes my music until it's put into a commercial. All that last part's in parentheses. So yeah, they decide to go all in. Like, their previous plan won't work anymore. Susan starts getting real kind of like commitment-y a little bit, saying like, hey, I can't go to Thorin now. I can't go to the mayor. I just couldn't bear it. Like, we're in this together. And she even goes so far as to say, like, have you given thought to like, I might be carrying your child. Who knows this? And Roland basically says like, yeah, that doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. We'll work this out. There's a little bit of a tragedy to that. We know it doesn't end very well, but the king reminds us very subtly, because I think at some point he says, Roland draped her with a shirt made in a kingdom she would never see, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just kind of like subtly twisting the knife, or intimating that they would twist the knife. So they set up new plans, saying like, hey, we can't use Shimi. People are going to figure that out. We can't just keep running into each other. People are going to figure that out. So let's just use this rock for now. And Roland doesn't say this, but he knows it in his heart that like, yeah, like we're going to mess this up eventually. We're just stupid kids. The longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get. So he's a little bit prescient in that regard. What do you guys think about Eldred going after Cordelia? Match made in heaven, right?
Of course. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. This is great.
It's weird because like it's strange to see Eldred Jonas, the head honcho of the big coffin hunters, sidling up and acting kind of human. Like, it doesn't seem, tell me if I'm wrong, both of you, it doesn't seem like he has any real designs. He doesn't have an ulterior motive. He just thinks, man, this Cordelia, she seems to have a real upstanding kind of vibe to her, right?
Well, earlier, I want to say in the previous episode when he's like hanging out, this is when he's telling his two lackeys to go hide the oil in Sitgo. He says, yeah, I'm gonna be up at the mayor's house partying down with these three lads or whatever. And he even thinks to himself like, I'm gonna get some gossip, but I'm not gonna go to the guy that's the big barrel, beer barrel gut dude that's drinking and buying everybody beers. I'm gonna find like the prim and proper woman who like, is flat as a pancake or something. He says something really derogatory like that, and then it's like that's the chick that I'm going to get some actual information out of.
Okay, I forgot about that. Okay, now there we go. Hello, comfort zone. It would be super weird if there was just this other side story, this earnest love tale between these two awful people.
I apologize because this is the second time I've done this, but I don't know what I was thinking. I had this written down and I forgot to bring it up on the last episode. There's a moment between I think it's DePepe and Jonas, where DePepe is like, I don't want to get him drunk, because if you get him drunk, like, he'll give you some weird Manny speech about how he's traveled through other worlds through these magical doors. I don't want to hear that shit anymore. And I'm like, wait, excuse me? Jonas has been through multiple worlds? Where is that covered, Mr. King? Where's that book? I would read that book.
Yeah, I want to read the tales of young Jonas, just like I want to read about Stephen Deshane and his old crew.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, on a long enough time frame, Stephen King will write it.
He's also like 70.
I don't like to think about that.
No, neither do I. But because Eldred came a courtin', Cordelia's blood is up, and she's in the, she's in the mine for love, and she just kind of gets this like detective vision for details about Susan. Like, she immediately hones in on like, oh, why is your hair wet? Your braid looks sloppy. Like, just immediately like calling all this out, just dressing her down. And Susan's pretty much just evasive about this. And that's where the chapter the chapter ends. We get a small interlude where Eddie asks a pretty good question. And I actually wondered about this when I first read the book. We're back in Kansas, and Eddie's like, hey, Roland, why are you remembering scenes that you weren't there for?
Yep.
Like, that's the thing that's literally played for a joke in a recent episode of Rick and Morty.
Right.
It's so frustrating too, because Roland brushes this question off. He's like, "That's not really the question you want to ask." And I'm like, me looking at the book. Yeah, it is. Absolutely, it is. I would like to know that, please.
For the past 200 pages.
So Roland doesn't answer it. There is an answer to this question that actually like satisfies, but Roland hasn't actually described what's happening with that orb of theirs. The question that Roland kind of deflects to is like, hey, doesn't it seem like this night's going on forever? Time is different, yes, but also the act of telling tales, in this mode, in this realm, causes things to get even weirder, right? It kind of calls to my mind a little bit the palaver between Roland and Martin, or Roland and Walter, rather. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that leads right into the next chapter. So this one went quicker than I expected it to. Man, I love this story so much. Like, it is a very good love story. I love the conspiracy aspect of this, the insular town that has something wrong with it. Kind of side to it. Like, it's such a good Western, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Chase, how about you? Any final thoughts on this portion of the book?
This is definitely where it feels like the story is kind of getting on its rails. The previous, the first portion of Susan was definitely a lot of world building, a lot of setting up characters, and there was probably a little bit more to talk about because there was a bit more to dive into. This from Shimi on, it is plot, and it is, you are kind of on this roller coaster until you hit back Kansas again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jeremy?
I agree with Chase. Like, this is the point of the book where it gets extremely exciting. I talked in the last episode of the podcast about being somewhat disappointed by the fact that this was going to be 90% like a prequel, more or less, because I was so into the story that was happening after the 50,000 year long cliffhanger that they left us off with, the Wastelands. So, but this is the point where it started coming together, and I started forgetting about the current story, and I just kind of got totally absorbed into this story and just wanting to know what's happening next. What is this mystery? What's going to happen to Susan, right? Because we know it's going to be something tragic, or else it wouldn't fuck Roland up so bad. Like, you still wouldn't be talking about this chick unless it was something extremely tragic. And it's like trying to like kind of figure that out and try to see what's happening was really, really interesting to me.
Yeah. And oh, good.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, kind of building off of that point, one of the nice things about listening to the podcast as I'm going through is before I even started, I picked up this book, I knew it's like, okay, this is mostly flashback, and I was able to kind of prep myself for that before I dove in, and that was incredibly helpful, because I'm sure I would have been the exact same way if I just picked this up as part of the normal course of reading a series. I would have opened it up and got 100 pages in and been like, okay, when are we going to be getting back to this giant glass tower? Apparently never. Okay, cool, that's fine, whatever.
Man, so I can't remember the name of this book, but like when I was in high school, I remember reading a bunch of like the Forgotten Realms, like Drizzt books, like with Wolfgar and all those folks. And, those are done in these, it's like, like 3 or 4 set books or like series. So here's a trilogy here, a quadrilogy there. There was one where like 90% of it was just this weird little love story between these two like villagers and almost a noble and stuff like that. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Why am I reading this? I'm a stupid high schooler. I want to read about sword fights and stuff. And then like at the very last second, it's like, and then Wolfgar walked in from the wilderness and saved everybody. What is that? That's a bad way to do this.
I missed that one. And I read a lot of those too. Apparently, I missed that one. Fortunately,
yeah. I think it was like the part of the Sword Coast series or whatever it was.
Okay,
yeah.
What, the Cleric Quintet, maybe?
No, that would have been a different one. This one, one specifically, was about that group of characters, Drizzt and Wolfgar and stuff like that. Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah. So I only bring that up to say this is a very well done kind of departure. We are seeing the foundations of a character that we're familiar with, and I'm making a point that I made last time. So ... Stephen King does a very good job of laying out the scaffolding. I think at one point, after he and Susan sleep together for the first time, it says, Roland slept well that night, and that would actually be the last time that he ever slept well again. And because it is being told from this third person omniscient narrator, it's not, Roland being hyperbolic about it. It's not the teen drama. It's like saying, like, we are on the cusp of not just the events that are going to take this story into a new direction and make it go much faster. This is kind of the axis around which Roland's story, moves, Yeah. So very good. Well, thank you so much for joining me, you guys. Thank you so much, listeners, for listening. Next time we're going to cover so we're breaking up the Come Reap chapter or section of the book into multiple pieces, just like we did this one. It's going to be 3 pieces. I forget where it ends, but it gets a little bit more action heavy, and there's a lot of stuff to cover there. Chase, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at CQLoudly. Or you could tune into my D&D actual play podcast, Another Path. I'm the DM, and I run players through a homebrew world using D&D 5th edition.
Nice. That is called Another Path?
Correct.
Cool. Is that found on places where quality podcasts are found?
Absolutely. All those fantastic places, as well as anotherpathpodcast.com.
Cool. Jeremy,
you can chat with me on Twitter at JG Greer. In my spare time, I do a Dark Souls podcast called Don't Give Up Skeleton. I consider it the 3rd best podcast, the Dark Souls podcast in the universe. So if you're into number 3, come find me.
The 2nd best if still running.
Well, sure, yeah. Do you know when this episode's coming out, Cole?
This episode, Jeremy, is coming out. Let me see.
Put you on the spot.
Early release on November the 21st, and for everybody on the 28th.
So if you're listening to this on the early feed, tomorrow will be the 100th episode of Don't Give Up Skeleton.
Holy cow.
And,
nice.
Yeah, I know. I got there way quick. I have a special guest lined up. I don't want to say who it is because we haven't actually recorded yet. But if you're into Dark Souls stuff, you definitely will know who he is. But that'll be out tomorrow. And if you're listening to this on the public feed, you can go find it at don'tgiveupskeleton.com and find all the episodes, including Cole and in the future Chase, who is very, very high on my list to get to. I just haven't got to him yet. So
excellent.
He'll be there soon.
Cool. It comes recommended. Yeah, and you can find me at Cole Ross, KoleRoss on Twitter, and on the other shows on Duckfeed.tv. You know, all the usual stuff you can do to help the show and the network, patreon.com/DuckFeedTV, and ratings or reviews. It's been a little bit since we've gotten one of those, so I'd like to see more. If you have the time or the inclination, it really does help us out. Otherwise,
iTunes has made that whole process so fucking impossible. I hate it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I wish it was not so hard. I wish they didn't have the corner on that.
I wish literally anybody else did aggregated podcast reviews.
Mm-hmm. But no. Occasionally I do a vanity search and I find one on Google, but like nobody does that there.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you could do it on Google, and I have an Android.
Yeah. It's like the Play Store has some weird stuff. It's a lot of unhappy people on that one. I find not in general. Like I'm not saying unhappy people go for Android. I'm just saying like those reviews. Oh, screw it. I don't know. I dug myself a hole. Anyway, thank you everybody. Even if you're on Android, I'm sure you're doing great. Phones don't matter. It's all fine. Anyway, take care, and until next time, long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.
Thank you.